So it's 44 days until the American election, and this is the Pelin Errol Taylor show, unplugged, travelling in southern Sweden. We've got the arrest of Puff Diddy, Sean Diddy Coombs, who's behind bars following his indictment on 3 charges of sex trafficking, racketeering and transportation to engage in prostitution. Apparently there are 3 or 8 civil lawsuits that have been filed against P. Diddy, minors that were sexually trafficked, and to discuss hidden cameras out of those 8 civil cases. We also know that several power brokers and Hollywood A-listers were in his orbit. Is he the next Epstein? Is he the Epstein of the Hollywood world, as Epstein was the Epstein of the Washington world? Diddy's LA and Miami homes were searched through and electronic devices were found. Well, he's a big hip-hop guy. He's been around for decades. He was brought up in poor circumstances. He then became friend of Oprah Winfrey, Anna Wintour, and apparently even Kamala Harris was in on some parties there. I guess Hollywood is a small, closed world. We don't know whether this will be the bombshell, the October surprise of the 2024 election. Some people quite doubt it. It's true that Justin Bieber looks as if he's in the candidacy for being the most pathetically victimized young boy turned pop star, judging by a number of clips put out there by the right's mischievous tweeters who have found an enormous number of clips where Justin Bieber is sort of semi-comically assaulted by everyone, ranging from that evening talk show host David Letterman and women decades older than him, kissing and hugging him, and Letterman makes a lunge for his crotch. And presiding over it all is P. Diddy, who, when he was 14 or 15, took care of Justin Bieber and put his arms around him, this young Canadian coming to the fabled lights of Hollywood. Was their sexual abuse followed by push to make him a meteoric career as a teen personality and singer? In videos where he's interviewed in his 20s, he alludes to a dark past. Was he trafficked around, and was he everyone's favourite little boy? There's an interesting interview, I think, somewhere with that Lord of the Rings guy, the one who played Frodo. He was forever young. I think he was 20 when he played Frodo, and he's in his 40s, and he has that still wide-eyed hobbit-like look. Well, he was saying, I think a few years ago, that this was the big secret of Hollywood, trafficking, and he hinted that he knew more than a thing or two about it. So was Bieber part of it? Well, there's some interesting videos again on X showing that, this guy was talking to hosts and stars and so on, and they were kind of, one said, "Oh God, you sure smell good for a 16-year-old." That said, you can't be entirely sure these days with people adding audio to not quite synced video sessions, so I don't take that to be 100%. He was denied bail twice last week, and he pleaded not guilty. But you could argue whether the numerous number of friends at the top levels of Hollywood have kept him out of jail. Maybe this should have been done much earlier. But you can also ask whether there'll also be a cover-up. There was a covering of Epstein sex trafficking network after a grand jury was convened to investigate a couple of years ago under a judge called Andre Damien Williams Jr., who was appointed U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York in June 2021. And then he became point man for the Epstein cover-up. As a result, although Maxwell and Epstein trafficked children for a quarter century, Williams stamped the extremely corrupt grand jury that indicted Ghislaine Maxwell on only one count of child trafficking and various lesser crimes, whereas no one else was charged at all, and so the conspiracy was allowed to survive. I mean, I know that grand juries apparently have a good reputation for the, I guess it's all these Hollywood judicial films, and the word grand jury sounds grand, but in fact, it's a seriously flawed process, and the grand jury makes the initial decision to indict, formally accuse a criminal defendant, but unlike a standard trial, a grand jury proceeding is cloaked in secret. They're not open to the public, and the identity of the witnesses who testify and the content of their testimony are never disclosed. If you want to cover something up, you pack the grand jury with a friendly judge and jurors that you control, and there's no outside disinfectant of transparency, and they're cloaked in this good name. And that's what happened with the case against Epstein, who of course died. Famously in 1985, Sol Wachtler, a former chief appellate judge of New York State, said that a special prosecutor could persuade grand jurors to indict a ham sandwich, or not, as the case may be, if nothing happens. So while Williams and the feds were aware of more than 30 underage Epstein victims who were conscripted by several procurers and molested by several perpetrators, and not a single was indicted other than Maxwell, because Williams's involvement. And it's interesting, if Williams was a sort of point man, a bag man for the chairman of the DNC in the early 2000s, and later candidate, I think, for the governorship of Pennsylvania, very close to the Clintons. That name crops up again. So if the Dems were more at risk politically from expose of Epstein, their man was district judge in New York, put a kibosh on it, and it looks as if he's on the same position with respect to the P. Diddy trial, even though he's in New York and the trial is in California, or Diddy lives in California, whereas Epstein did in fact live in New York. We might see a lack of revelations there. So while Williams said that the sentence to Ghislaine Maxwell sent a strong message that no one's above the law, it's never too late for justice, the statements were rather ironic, because he basically covered up the largest child sex trafficking network ever acknowledged by law enforcement. This is according to Nick Bryant, who's been on my show and who has written a couple of books about it. He's been chasing child traffickers and sex traffickers for a very long time, and he argues that I think he said to me, that I guess the sort of poster child of the sex trafficking ring was the 17-year-old what's her name, Giuffre, a girl who was on Prince Andrew's arm. Andrew was a high-profile figure, and she was young and pretty, but she wasn't actually below the age of majority. So while it was sleazy that Andrew was sleeping with and being given, grapes fed to the mouth by a girl who was younger than his two daughters, that wasn't illegal. It was just sleazy. But that was a kind of limited hangout situation where that might have been a kind of cover. I mean, it happened, but it wasn't the worst that happened. There was sadism, there was beatings. And in Europe, we've even seen snuff movies of people being killed to order. I mean, that might not have been that bad in the United States, but the abuse was much more violent and happened at a much earlier age in the Epstein cases, and there's blackmail video of it and from Epstein Island, than what we ever heard of those Giuffre cases, 17-year-old girl hanging on a fallen prince's arm. And Williams played his part in very, very carefully managing that trial, so that Ghislaine was the only one indicted, and she was locked away for 20 years or whatever it is. But very few testimonies came forward. It was a rather sort of milquetoast trial. So Williams was doing his job for the American deep state, and he is on this case here. I mean, he was incidentally received substantial funding from the Paul Daisy and Soros Fellowships for New Americans, which has given the man who's born in Jamaica, I think, up to $90,000. These names cropping up: Clinton, Hillary, Soros, and so on. So anyway, Williams is currently the overseer of the P. Diddy case, because it was launched from the Southern District of New York, which is a very prestigious judicial place in America. Even though the search warrants were executed in LA and Miami, like Epstein, P. Diddy's homes had hidden cameras that would record his freak-off parties and non-freak-off parties, which were attended by showbiz luminaries, professional athletes, and politicians. Well, we'll see if how much was recorded, who was recorded, was being subjected to blackmail, who was subjected being potentially up for blackmail, and what importance bad actors, whether it be foreign states, whether it be the FBI, had in broadcasting or recording the shenanigans of Hollywood stars. Because unlike politicians, no one really expects them to be demure and unsexual. I mean, and the sex and drugs as old as Hollywood itself. But it may be that they're controlled in order to pursue a certain message, let's say pro-Democrat, the Hollywood is all lined up behind the Democrats. I don't know. So Nick Bryant, who's on this show, concludes an article on his excellent website, nickbryantnyc.com. I mean, he's really up to date on all this global sex trafficking and sex blackmail business. He thinks that the fix is in with Williams at the helm of the case against Mr. Diddy, or Mr. Sean Combs, this rapper turned possible agent of an intelligence agency blackmail operation. The fix is in, whatever that fix is going to be. So there we are. That's today's main news story. We'll see how it plays out again in the next couple of weeks. I thought it was rather tasteless of Trump, to be honest. He apparently forwarded on his X account, or Truth Social, a video, or was it just a shot photograph, allegedly, of Puff Diddy back in 2001, and a rather svelte-looking Kamala Harris on his arm or standing next to him. Well, the implication is, obviously, she was maybe a blackmail victim, so she's had playing dark games with young boys, or perhaps even young girls, and when she becomes president, whoever controls Pip Diddy controls Kamala with videos that have been secreted away somewhere. But guess what? I mean, it's a plausible story. It's not impossible, and if it's true, it's of huge significance. But guess what? Sleuths on the internet found out that Trump was making a mistake there. It wasn't Kamala Harris. Somebody transposed Kamala's head onto that onto another young woman's body who was hanging around Puff Diddy 20 years ago. I think Kamala has met Puff Diddy, but she wasn't in that sort of close relationship with him. So, I mean, I think Trump can win the election without resorting to fake news. I mean, we don't live up to the worst allegations, and we know that the Democrats also say fake news. So why did Trump do this? He's only playing into the hands of people who do say that he's not interested in the truth. But anyway, this issue will be playing out, and it's only 44 days until the election. This is the Pelling Eros Taylor Show on Unplugged on this in this cottage here on a Monday afternoon in September.